Hello everyone. I am the Midnight Storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. I never believed in haunted places. Old buildings creak. Pipes rattle. Lights flicker. It's just the nature of aging infrastructure. Or at least, that's what I used to think before I took the job at Lyndhurst Academy. The ad was simple: overnight security, $850 per week. Must be okay with solitude. The building was a defunct private school that had once hosted elite summer programs for gifted teens. Now, it was abandoned. Not condemned, just left behind. A shell of education. The first night I arrived, the wind howled through the trees like it had a secret to tell. My only task was to walk the halls every hour, check the doors, and log any disturbances. There was a desk in the front office with a flickering monitor showing grainy security cam feeds. Most of them were static. A few showed empty corridors with warped tiles and long shadows. At 11:07 p.m., I started my first round. The air was heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. My flashlight beam danced across old posters, achievement through discipline, and dusty trophy cases from a time when this place was alive. As I passed the auditorium, I stopped. The door was cracked open. Just slightly. It shouldn't have been. I pushed it gently. The hinges let out a soft groan as the door widened to reveal rows of seats, all empty, facing a stage draped in red velvet. A chalkboard stood center stage, untouched, with faint white smudges from erased equations. Then, from somewhere in the rafters above, I heard a single sound. Chalk. Scraping against slate. But the board was empty. No one was there. And yet, the sound continued. I stepped closer to the stage, heartbeat in my throat, trying to rationalize what I was hearing. Maybe it was debris shifting above. Maybe a raccoon. But the sound of chalk on slate was too distinct, too deliberate. Then it stopped. I waited. One breath. Two. Silence. The lights overhead flickered, humming softly as if catching their breath. I aimed my flashlight at the chalkboard, expecting nothing. But words had appeared. Fresh. Sharp. Uneven. Class begins at 3. 11 I staggered back, the air around me suddenly colder. My instincts screamed to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. I blinked hard. When I looked again, the message was gone. The board was blank, untouched. I stumbled out into the hallway and slammed the auditorium door shut behind me, locking it with a trembling hand. I tried laughing at myself, but it came out dry and cracked. I scribbled something in the logbook when I got back to the desk. Auditorium unlocked upon arrival, possible wind shift, checked and secured. I didn't mention the chalkboard. Didn't mention the noise. I sat in the chair behind the desk and stared at the flickering monitors until my next round. At 1:06 a.m., I began walking again. The hallway to the library was darker than before, like the lights had dimmed just enough to feel unnatural. I passed the old classrooms, room 2A, 2B, 2C, each filled with desks covered in white sheets like ghosts mid-lesson. Outside room 3A, I stopped. A light was on inside. I hadn't turned it on. No one had. I reached for the doorknob. It was cold. Wet. As if someone had been holding it with shaking hands moments before. I pushed the door open. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a classroom bathed in faint, unnatural light. The fluorescence above flickered in perfect rhythm, as if syncing with an invisible metronome. The desks, unlike the others I'd seen, weren't covered in sheets. They were uncovered, clean, as if someone had been using them. Notebooks sat on several of them. Open. Pages scribbled with writing that looked rushed, panicked. Ink streaked, corners torn. The closest desk had words etched deep into the surface, "We never left." I stepped inside. It was freezing, far colder than the hallway outside. My breath fogged. Goosebumps crept up my arms. I made my way down the aisle between desks, flashlight trembling in my grip. A slow thud echoed behind me. I turned. A notebook had fallen to the floor, pages splayed open. The writing inside wasn't random anymore. It was addressed to me. "You see us, don't you?" I felt my chest tighten. I backed out of the room, leaving the notebook behind, refusing to turn my back on it until I was out in the hall. The light shut off behind me. Automatically. I didn't log anything that time. I just sat at the desk in the front office, shivering, watching the monitors like they held the answer to something I didn't understand. At exactly 3:11 a.m., something changed. The static on monitor 4 cleared for 3 seconds. It showed the auditorium. Lights on. Students seated at desks that hadn't been there earlier. All facing forward. All motionless. A figure stood at the chalkboard. Tall. Thin. In a long coat that looked like a teacher's uniform from a different era. The figure raised an arm and began writing. But the monitor flickered again, and the image disappeared. I ran to the auditorium. When I opened the door, the room was empty. Silent. Except for the chalkboard. On it, freshly written, "Late to class." I didn't sleep that morning. I drove home with trembling hands, watching the sky lighten through bloodshot eyes. When I closed my eyes, even for a moment, I saw them, those seated students, frozen in time, waiting for something, or someone. By nightfall, exhaustion had settled into my bones like cement. But I went back. I told myself I had imagined it. That it was a stress dream. Maybe a sleep-deprived hallucination. I told myself a lot of things. But I still brought a small crucifix with me and taped it to the monitor. Just in case. Midnight came slowly. The building felt different. Heavier. The air clung to my skin like damp wool. I did one round. Just one. When I returned to the front desk, every monitor was off. All black screens. I tapped the side of the console. Nothing. Then one flickered on. Monitor 2, the hallway outside room 3A. The door opened slowly, though no one was near it. And then, a figure stepped out. Small. Slouched. It was a boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, dressed in an old uniform, buttoned shirt, short tie, black shoes. His skin was pale, almost gray. His hair was wet, hanging in clumps over his forehead like he'd just come from the rain. He turned and looked directly into the camera. I felt it, his gaze. Like he knew I was watching. He lifted a hand. Waved. Then the monitor went black again. I rushed to the hallway. Room 3A was dark. Silent. Closed. No sign of anyone. But a wet footprint trailed down the hall, small, barefoot, leading to the janitor's closet. The same closet that had been locked since I arrived. I tried the handle. It opened. The air inside was cold and stale. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old textbooks, cleaning supplies, broken clock parts. But on the back wall, something new had appeared. A schedule, written in chalk directly on the cinder block. 3:11 a.m., Math 3:30 a.m., Literature 3:50 a.m., Observation, and beneath it, one final line, scrawled in frantic, looping letters, attendance is mandatory. I backed out of the janitor's closet, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I shut the door, gently, like closing a coffin. Something told me slamming it would only draw more attention. I didn't return to the front desk. I sat on the floor against the wall in the admin hallway, staring down at the empty corridor, waiting for something. At 3:11 a.m. on the dot, the bell rang again. 3 chimes, just like before. Then silence. Then voices. Dozens of them. All around me. Not loud. Not shouting. Just murmuring, like a classroom filled with students during a test. Indistinct sentences layered over each other. Questions, answers, someone reading aloud. I covered my ears. It didn't help. A cool breeze passed down the hall. But there were no open windows. No fans. Then a shadow passed across the ceiling above me. Not walking. I stood up, slowly, and turned the corner back toward the front desk. The monitors were back on. And all of them, all 8 screens, were showing me. Sitting. Standing. Walking. In real time. Different angles. As if I were being observed by something that saw more than just one hallway. Only one monitor was different. Monitor 7. It showed a classroom I hadn't seen before. The camera pointed at a chalkboard, dimly lit by overhead lights. Something had been written on it. I leaned closer. Your test begins now. The screen flickered. A new line appeared. Question 1, why are you still here? My breath caught. Then a new line. Question 2, why didn't you leave after the first night? And then the last line appeared, the chalk scratching itself across the board in real time. Question 3, who's watching whom? I slammed the power button on the console. Everything went dark. But behind me, something whispered, time's up. I spun around, flashlight already raised, beam slicing through the dark. But the hallway behind me was empty. No whispers now. No movement. Just the echo of my own breath and the faint hum of the building. I stumbled backward until I found the wall and slid down, heart hammering against my ribs. I stayed there for what felt like an hour, though my watch insisted it had only been 3 minutes. The monitors stayed off. No more messages. No more images. Just me. Alone. Or so I wanted to believe. Around 4 a.m., I made the mistake of checking my phone. No signal, as usual, but now, my call log was filled with dozens of missed calls, all from an unknown number. Every single one was time-stamped at 3:11 a.m. Even creepier. Each voicemail was only 3 seconds long. I played one. White noise. I played another. The sound of chalk on a board. And another. Breathing. Clothes. Wet. Gurgling. My stomach turned. I dropped the phone, let it clatter across the floor. I didn't pick it back up. When the sun finally rose, I left without clocking out. I drove straight home. No sleep. No food. Just silence and locked doors. I planned to quit. To email the contractor and tell them I couldn't finish the week. But when I opened my inbox, I saw a message already waiting. Subject line, absence noted, body, see you tonight. Room 3A. 3:11 sharp. No sender. I closed the laptop and went straight to the shower, hoping hot water could melt the fear clinging to my skin. But even with my eyes shut tight, I couldn't shake the image of that chalkboard. Of that message. Of that question. Who's watching whom? Because now, I felt it everywhere. Not just at the school. In the corners of my own apartment. Reflections moving just a second too late. Doors shifting ever so slightly when I passed. And every clock I owned, they all reset. To 3:11. I didn't want to go back. Every part of me screamed to walk away, forget the job, pretend the whole thing had never happened. But when 10 p.m. rolled around, I was already in my car. Already halfway to Lyndhurst Academy. It wasn't obligation. It wasn't money. It was something else. A pull. Like unfinished business. Like the school itself wanted me back. The building looked the same, old bricks, dark windows, the faint glow of the security light above the front entrance. But the moment I stepped through the door, something felt different. It was too quiet. Like the kind of quiet that swallows sound. The air felt full. I went straight to the front desk, but the monitors were already on. All of them. This time, they weren't showing hallways. They were showing me. Sitting on a bench outside the school, from behind. Standing in my kitchen. Sleeping on my couch. Footage from my apartment. From my car. From places I never saw cameras. I stared, paralyzed, as a new image faded in, a desk. A classroom. Room 3A. In the center, a single test paper. I blinked. Suddenly, it was there, in front of me. On the front desk. Real. I picked it up with shaking hands. The header read, Final Examination, Lyndhurst Academy name. Underscore 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 date. Underscore 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 underscore. The first question, what have you learned? The second, why did you ignore the warnings? And the last, how do you plan to escape? There were no answers. Just blank lines. Then I heard it again, chalk on slate. Coming from the hallway. Slow. Scraping. Deliberate. It was writing another question. Not on the test. But for me. I followed the sound down the corridor, each footstep feeling heavier than the last. The air was thick. Humid, like a storm was forming inside the building. The lights above buzzed softly, and for a second I thought I heard them whispering too. The chalkboard in room 3A glowed faintly before I even reached the door. I stepped inside slowly. The desks were gone. So were the chairs. The walls were covered in notes now, edge to edge, like hundreds of students had been scribbling at once. Pages pinned to the plaster, taped over each other in a chaotic collage. On the chalkboard was a new question, written in perfect cursive. If the bell rings and no one leaves, did the class ever end? Underneath it, scrawled in darker, more violent strokes, ring the bell. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. Suddenly, something metallic dropped behind me. I spun around. A brass handbell lay on the floor by the door. Old. Tarnished. A leather strap curled loosely around the handle. I didn't touch it. I backed away slowly, but then, behind me, the chalk started moving. Writing. by itself. I stood frozen, watching letters scratch themselves into the slate with impossible precision. You're part of the curriculum now. And then, beneath it, sit. Listen. Learn. The room shifted. I swear it did. The walls seemed to grow taller, the ceiling farther away, the door smaller. My vision tunneled, and suddenly, I wasn't in room 3A anymore. I was in something older. Deeper. A classroom underground. The desks reappeared. And every one of them was filled. Pale faces turned toward me. Empty eyes. Each student wore the same uniform. Same blank expression. Same wet hair clinging to their temples. And in front of the board stood the teacher. Tall. Still. Face hidden in shadow. He pointed at me. Then he spoke, voice like gravel sliding over stone. You're late. I couldn't move. The teacher's outstretched arm held more weight than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a command. My legs stepped forward without my permission, my breath shallow and mechanical. I took the only empty desk in the room, front and center. The students around me didn't blink. Didn't shift. They simply stared. Waiting. The teacher turned back to the chalkboard and began to write. But the chalk didn't scrape like before. It shrieked. Each stroke made the hairs on my neck rise, like nails dragged across my spine. Words appeared. Lesson 1, Identity is an illusion. He underlined it once. Slowly. Then, he faced the class again. Still no face, just a silhouette that pulsed at the edges, like static barely holding a shape. He spoke again. Name, he said, pointing to the boy on my left. The boy stood, expression unchanged. Alex Granger, he replied in a monotone. Wrong, the teacher growled. The boy blinked, then his features melted. Skin, hair, clothing, gone in an instant. Just a black smudge where he had been. The desk was empty. Name, the teacher said, pointing to the girl on my right. She didn't answer. Just trembled. He slammed the chalk on the desk. Name. Her voice cracked. I don't remember. Correct, he said. She remained. Then he turned to me. Name. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My brain reached, fumbled, panicked. Who was I? I knew who I was. Didn't I? My name is. The lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. All I heard was the teacher's voice. Late. Unprepared. You don't belong here. Then whispers. A chorus of students chanting, make him stay. Make him stay. Make him stay. Something icy touched my neck. I leapt up, gasping, suddenly back in room 3A. It was empty. No students. No teacher. No writings. Just me. And the bell. Sitting on the desk. Ringing softly. By itself. The sound of that bell, it wasn't loud, but it filled the entire room. A slow, deliberate ring that seemed to pulse against my ribs. It echoed longer than it should have, as if the walls were holding on to the sound and feeding it back, again and again. I stared at the bell as it rocked gently on its base, though no hand had touched it. It was calling something. Or someone. I turned to leave, but the classroom door was no longer there. The wall was seamless. Smooth. Like it had never had a frame, a knob, or hinges. Panic crawled through me as I looked around the room. No windows, no other exits. Just desks. Dozens of them. And now, they weren't empty. Figures sat in the chairs, heads bowed, hands folded neatly on desks as if waiting for an exam. The air grew cold again. Thicker. Harder to breathe. One by one, the students lifted their heads. Their eyes were gone. Hollow. Deep sockets where nothing should live. And yet, I felt their gaze burning through me. Then they began to whisper. At first, I couldn't make out the words. Then slowly, in perfect unison, ring the bell. Ring the bell. Ring the bell. No, I whispered. I didn't come here for this. But my hand moved on its own. Trembled. Reached forward. Ring it, they chanted now, louder, sharper. The bell jumped on the desk. Then the lights exploded. Glass rained down. Darkness poured into the room like ink, and something in the black moved, fast, just outside my vision. I felt breath on my neck. Ring it, said the teacher's voice, low and final. I grabbed the bell and hurled it across the room. It struck the far wall, and everything stopped. No voices. No breath. Just stillness. And then, a soft knock. 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 From behind the wall where the door used to be. Then a whisper, "You failed the lesson." The knock came again. Softer this time. More deliberate. 3 slow taps that echoed inside my chest like a second heartbeat. I pressed my back against the far wall, as far from the sound as possible, but the room seemed to shrink. The space between the desks grew narrower, the shadows deeper, the air heavier with every second. Then I noticed it, the chalkboard. It had changed again. Words had appeared, written in long, trembling strokes, lesson incomplete. No one leaves until it's finished. The bell, which I had thrown, now rested neatly in the center of the teacher's desk again, unbroken, untouched, as if nothing had happened. I didn't move. Not until the knock became pounding. Bang. 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 The wall where the door had once been bulged inward with every hit, as if something on the other side was trying to force its way through. I braced myself, breath caught in my throat. Then, silence. The wall stilled. The light steadied. The students, the eyeless things seated at the desks, had turned their heads toward me again. Their mouths opened, perfectly synchronized, but they didn't speak. Instead, a single tone filled the room. High. Piercing. Like a television test pattern cranked to full volume. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears. And then I heard the voice again, quiet, beneath the noise. "We were forgotten. You'll remember us now." I opened my eyes and I was back. Back at the front desk. The classroom gone. The bell gone. Just me, the monitors, and the same old hallway feeds. It was 5:17 a.m. Only 2 hours had passed. But something followed me back. Because on monitor 4, showing the hallway outside room 3A, I saw it. A new note taped to the door. One word, written in red ink, "Stay." I stared at the monitor, hoping the word would vanish. That it was just some glitch in the feed, a leftover burn on the screen. But the image remained clear. Crisp. "Stay." Taped dead center on the door to room 3A. I stood, legs unsteady, and stepped into the hallway. The silence buzzed in my ears. My flashlight beam jittered against the walls, flickering like it, too, was afraid of what waited ahead. I passed room 2C. Then 2D. My own footsteps echoed just slightly too long, as if something else was walking a half step behind me. When I reached room 3A, I stopped. The note was real. Taped exactly where I saw it. I didn't touch it. I didn't open the door. I just stared at that single word written in a shaky, almost childlike hand. Stay. Then I noticed something at my feet. Chalk. Dozens of small pieces, scattered across the floor in a perfect circle around the doorway. Some fresh. Some broken. All of them pointed inward, like arrows. I backed away. But the hallway behind me had changed. The windows were gone. The emergency lights were out. Only the door to room 3A remained. Open now. Wide open. A warm light pulsed from within, flickering like candlelight. I stepped backward, but the floor groaned, loudly, like a protest. Then another groan echoed behind me, followed by footsteps. Soft. Barefoot. Several of them. I turned fast. Empty hall. I turned back toward room 3A, and standing just inside the door was a student. Not pale. Not eyeless. Just a boy. He looked about 15. Wore a navy blue uniform with a school crest I didn't recognize. He raised a hand slowly and pointed inside the room. Then spoke without moving his lips. It's your turn to teach. I froze. That phrase echoed in my mind like it had been injected straight into my thoughts. It's your turn to teach. I wanted to speak. To ask who he was. What this place was. Why me? But my mouth wouldn't open. My tongue felt heavy. My jaw locked tight. The boy didn't blink. Didn't breathe. He just kept pointing into the room. I stepped closer to the door, heart thudding with every inch. The warm light inside pulsed like it was alive, inviting me, or warning me. Inside, the desks were back. All 30 of them. All filled. Every face turned toward me. They looked more human now. But still wrong. Too still. Too symmetrical. As if copied and pasted. Like someone had drawn people from memory and then breathed just enough life into them to make them sit upright. And at the front of the room, where the teacher usually stood, was an empty chair. Not a desk. A chair. Waiting. I stepped over the threshold, and the door slammed shut behind me. The lights went off. The only illumination now came from the chalkboard. A soft white glow surrounded it like a screen, pulsing gently. Words appeared, today's lesson, consequence. A long silence followed. Then a book slammed shut. One of the students had moved. Just a twitch of the hand. But it was enough to break the spell. I backed toward the door. But the chair at the front screeched loudly across the tile, shoving itself forward. Closer to me. My name appeared on the chalkboard, letter by letter. Mr., my last name, a beat past. Then, take your seat. And the classroom whispered in unison, class is waiting. Locked. No handle. No keyhole. Just cold metal that refused to budge. Behind me, the whispers grew louder. The students weren't just staring now. They were leaning forward. Hands flat on desks. Eyes locked on mine. Expectant. Hungry. The chair at the front scraped again, moving another inch closer to the center of the room. Closer to me. I took a shaky breath and stepped forward. If this was a game, maybe playing along would buy me time. Maybe it was better than being dragged. I approached the chair, each step heavier than the last. When I reached it, I sat. The moment I did, the classroom exhaled. All the students sat back. At ease. As if satisfied. Then the chalkboard cleared, and new words appeared. Final unit, guilt. Underneath that, in your own words, explain what you did wrong. I blinked. What? The lights dimmed. The students leaned forward again. The chalkboard glowed brighter, letters pulsing. Explain. The room seemed to wait, breath held, silent, expectant. I stood. I didn't do anything, I said. I'm not, this isn't. A desk slammed shut in the back row. Then another. One by one, students began slamming their desks closed. Bang. 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 Over and over. The chalkboard flashed. Wrong. 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 I raised my arms. I just took a job. I didn't know what this place was. Everything went still. Then a single line of chalk began to write again, slowly, deliberately. You ignored the signs. And beneath that, you stayed. The lights snapped off. Total blackness. Then, a whisper at my ear, class dismissed, unless you'd prefer detention. The word detention echoed in my skull like a threat carved into bone. I stood up fast, chair clattering backward. The room was still black, but I could feel them, the students. Still seated. Still watching. Their breathing shallow. Measured. Synchronized. I moved slowly toward where the door had been. My hands found only wall. No handle. No frame. Then, behind me, something moved. Footsteps. Not walking, gliding. Soft fabric brushing against desks. A low voice hummed. A tune I almost recognized. A lullaby? The air grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me. Then the lights flicked back on, but the room had changed. The students were gone. The desks were overturned. Every window boarded. The chalkboard had been shattered. And written across the floor in broken pieces of chalk, one message sprawled from corner to corner: you failed. Suddenly, a loud alarm began to ring, like a school fire drill, only deeper, slower. Not mechanical. Organic. As if the building itself was groaning in protest. I stumbled into the hallway, which had returned somehow. Lights buzzed overhead. Lockers stood open, their contents spilling out in slow motion. Papers, books, shoes, old test forms with no names. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I hadn't checked it in hours. I pulled it out. No service, but one notification blinked on the lock screen: new voicemail, 3:11 a.m. I played it. The voice was my own. Screaming. Begging. And then whispering, don't stay for the next bell. The voicemail ended with a sound I'll never forget: chalk breaking. Not snapping. Not falling. Breaking, slowly, deliberately, like something was being scratched out forever. I stared at the phone screen, my reflection warped and pale in the glass. I looked like someone else. Or maybe I just looked like what I'd become. Down the hallway, a red glow bloomed. Emergency lights. But they weren't flickering, no, they pulsed. Like a heartbeat. And at the center of the glow was the front entrance. The exit. Wide open. I didn't think. I ran. Feet pounding across cracked linoleum. Lockers whizzed by in my periphery, and the building groaned behind me as if waking from a long, angry sleep. The air thickened the closer I got to the door. It felt like I was running through water. Then, I was there. The threshold. I lunged, and hit something solid. The doorway was sealed. Glass, but harder. Warmer. Breathing? I pounded on it, fists aching. Outside, the sun was rising. Morning. But I couldn't reach it. Then, behind me, the hallway lights snapped off one by one. Click. 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 Approaching fast. I turned around slowly. At the far end of the corridor, a shape stood. Tall. Thin. A silhouette in a long coat. Its hand lifted, chalk between two fingers, and began to write in the air itself, glowing letters forming in the darkness. You don't leave class early. And beneath it, final detention begins now. The lockers beside me slammed shut in unison. The lights above exploded. And behind me, that strange glass door vanished. Only the hallway remained. And footsteps, many of them, marching in rhythm, drawing closer. I backed away, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The marching was growing louder, an army of footfalls echoing off the walls in perfect rhythm. I didn't know where to go. Every hallway twisted into another. Doors were gone. Windows bricked up. The school had become a maze, no, a trap. Still, I ran. I turned left. Then right. Then down a stairwell I didn't recognize. The walls here were concrete. Damp. The lights overhead hung from exposed wires, swaying gently as if someone had just passed beneath them. My footsteps slowed as I descended. It was quieter here. Too quiet. I reached a landing and found a heavy metal door, slightly ajar. Faded white letters spelled, "Detention Wing, Staff Access Only." I hesitated. Then I pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and something else, regret. That's the only word my mind could grasp. Like the room itself remembered. Desks lined the walls, all facing inward in a strange circle. A single chair sat in the middle, and on it, an open notebook. I approached. Its pages were yellowed, fragile. But the ink was fresh. The first line read, "This is your assignment now." I turned the page. Document what you see. They need to be remembered. The next page was already filled, with my handwriting. I hadn't written it. But I read the words anyway. I arrived on my first night, thought the building was empty. I was wrong, it was everything. Everything I'd experienced. Every moment. Every noise. Every shadow. Already written. Then the final line, if you stop writing, they stop remembering. And if they stop remembering, you stay. The notebook snapped shut by itself. And from the ceiling above, dozens of eyes opened in the dark. Watching. Waiting. I stood frozen beneath the ceiling of eyes. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just stared, dozens of them, embedded in the concrete like fossils that had never truly died. The notebook sat closed on the chair, but I could still feel it breathing. Yes, breathing, like the pages were lungs, inhaling fear and exhaling memory. I backed toward the door. It was gone. Not closed. Not blocked. Gone. Just another wall now, seamless and blank. The temperature dropped. The room darkened. And then, desks scraped. One by one, they began to turn, facing inward toward the chair and the notebook, as if expecting me to return. I spun around, searching for another way out. There was none. Then a voice filled the room, not loud, but everywhere at once. Classrooms are for learning. I turned in circles, desperate to find the source. Detention is for remembering. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. Write. Or stay. The notebook opened again, its pages flipping themselves, landing on a blank sheet. A pen rolled toward my feet. I didn't want to touch it. But something cold brushed the back of my neck, a gentle push. A warning. I picked it up. The pages trembled. And then, I began to write. Not with intention. Not with understanding. The words poured out like they were coming from somewhere else. My hand moving faster than my mind could follow. I wrote about the hallway that had no end. The bell that rang before time. The boy with no eyes whispering beneath the stairs. Things I hadn't even seen, yet. When I paused, the pen fought against me. No, the room spoke again. No pauses. No escape. You are the lesson now. And then I realized something chilling. The ink wasn't black. It was red. And warm. The ink, no, the blood. Dripped from the pen tip, curling into letters with eerie precision. The notebook absorbed it eagerly, the pages never filling, no matter how many lines I scrawled. It wanted everything. Memories. Thoughts. Fears. Dreams. Each word pulled something from me. A sound behind me made me freeze. Breathing. But not human. It was low. Wet. Like something was learning how to inhale for the first time. I turned slowly. The desks were no longer empty. They were filled. Not with students, no. With shapes. Hunched figures in uniforms soaked through with ink. Or blood. Their heads lolled to one side, jaws slack, eyes glowing faintly from deep sockets. They weren't watching me anymore. They were waiting. Waiting for me to stop. Because I knew now, if I stopped writing, they'd stand up. And if they stood up, I wouldn't be writing anymore. I gripped the pen tighter, my hand cramping. The notebook flipped to a new page, its edges curling with heat. I didn't feel the cuts anymore. Didn't feel the fatigue. Only the compulsion. Then something new appeared on the page, words I hadn't written, almost complete. Another page turned on its own. One last entry required. I begged. Out loud. What do you want from me? The ceiling above cracked. Dust rained down. A slow rumble filled the space. Then, a voice whispered in my own handwriting across the page, "Teach us how to forget." I dropped the pen. Everything stopped. The room exhaled. The students, all of them, turned their heads in perfect sync and stared at me. Then they spoke. Together. Hollow and slow, "Now it's your turn to answer." I couldn't breathe. The air was gone, replaced with something thicker. Heavier. Grief, maybe. Regret. Whatever it was, it pressed against my chest like 100 unseen hands. The notebook lay open before me. The pen rolled slowly back and forth across the desk, moving as if pushed by a phantom breath. Teach us how to forget. That line pulsed on the page, flickering like firelight. The figures in the desks waited, their heads tilted in unnatural angles, as if they didn't understand the concept of forgetting, only remembering. Only looping. I stood slowly. The ceiling cracked again, a web of thin fractures reaching across the concrete like veins. Red dust floated down. My voice trembled. "You can't forget if you never leave," one of the figures rose. Then another. Then all of them. Desks slid away like water. The room reshaped itself, walls bending outward, the ceiling lifting. The space grew endless, like a void wearing the skin of a classroom. And in the center, rising from the cracked floor, was the bell. Polished. Golden. Glowing. The same bell that had rung on my first night. A whisper slid through the air, "Ring it. And end the lesson." I hesitated. What if it was a lie? What if ringing it locked me here forever? But another whisper followed, "Or don't, and become the next instructor." I stepped forward. Lifted the bell. It was warm. Humming. Alive. I closed my eyes. And I rang it. Once. The sound wasn't a chime. It was a scream, ripped from the bones of the school, from the walls, from the students, from the space between seconds. The room exploded into light. Everything, gone. I woke up outside the school gates. It was morning. Clear. Quiet. Peaceful. The building behind me stood still, windows boarded, ivy growing over the brick. I checked my watch. 3:11 a.m. I never took another night job. But every now and then, I hear a bell ring. And I remember. Because I taught them how to forget. But I never could. I moved back into my parents' house last month. Just until I got back on my feet. They'd retired to a quiet suburb, clean sidewalks, hedges trimmed like military cuts, motion sensor lights on every porch. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. At least, that's what I thought. The first night back, I had trouble sleeping. Everything was too quiet. No sirens. No traffic. Just the hum of a distant street lamp and the occasional breeze. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Steady. One after the other, like someone dragging slightly as they walked. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. It wasn't loud, just barely audible beneath the silence. But it was there. Moving down the street. Past our gate. Past the neighbors. I looked out the window. No one was there. But our motion light clicked on. Then the next houses. Then the one after that. Like something was moving down the street, but invisible. Our dog, Toby, began to growl from the living room. A low, deep sound he hadn't made since he was a puppy. He wouldn't stop until the lights all turned off again, one by one. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a stray cat. Maybe the wind. The next morning, I asked Mom about it. She didn't even blink. "Oh, that? It's always around. Just don't look outside when it passes. Just don't look outside when it passes." That was all Mom said. Like she was giving instructions for laundry, not warning me about whatever that was. I asked her again later that day, hoping she'd say she was joking. She wasn't. "We've lived here 6 years," she said, rinsing dishes like it was any other Tuesday. "It started after the old Patterson house got torn down. First just dogs barking. Then the lights. Then, things." I pressed her, but she shut down. Said it was best not to talk about it too much. "You give it space in your head, it gives you a place in its path," she said. I thought she was losing it. Until the next night. Same time, 3:12 a.m. Same sound, slow, dragging footsteps on the street outside. This time I recorded it. I left my phone by the window, video running. I didn't look. I forced myself not to. When I played it back in the morning, the screen was pitch black. But the audio, there it was. Footsteps. Breathing. My name. Whispered. Twice. And worst of all, in the final second of the recording, the camera jolted, like someone had knocked it sideways, but I never touched it. I tried showing my dad. He wouldn't listen. Instead, he took my phone and deleted the video. "Don't mess with it," he said quietly. "Let it walk. Let it pass." I started staying up on purpose. Each night, I'd sit near the front window, lights off, watching. The clock would hit 3:12. And like clockwork, it began. The footsteps. They always started at the far end of the street, just beyond the cul-de-sac. I couldn't see anyone, but every porch light flicked on in a perfect rhythm, one after the other, as something moved past. Toby would growl again. Not barking, growling, like something was in the house. Like he could feel it inside the walls. I never saw it. But I felt it. The air would shift. Like static before lightning. My arms would tingle. My breath would catch. The hairs on my neck would lift. Every night. Then, one night, something changed. At 3:12, the footsteps started. But they didn't stay outside. One light flicked on. Then another. Then our porch light. Then the hallway light. Then, the basement light. Inside. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the basement door. Toby refused to follow. He backed away, tail low, eyes locked on the door like it would open itself. I opened it. Darkness stared back. Cold air, much colder than it should have been for a summer night, blew up the stairs. The flashlight flickered once, then held. I took one step down. Then another. And then, from the bottom of the stairs, in my own voice, something whispered, "Come see what you recorded." I froze halfway down the stairs. The whisper echoed again, softer this time, almost like it was being pulled apart by the walls. "Come see what you recorded," still in my voice. But too perfect. Like someone imitating me from the outside in. I forced myself to keep going. One step at a time. My flashlight flickered again, casting long, jerky shadows against the cement walls. The basement was unfinished, just gray slab floors, wooden shelves, and dusty air. Everything looked normal. Until I saw it. My phone. Lying face up on the old washing machine. But I hadn't brought it down here. The screen was cracked. Recording. Timer running. I picked it up with a shaking hand and hit stop. It had captured 37 minutes. I hit play. The video was dark at first. Just the humming of the basement. Then, footsteps. But not on the floor. On the ceiling. Scraping. Slow. Measured. Then came the voice. Not mine. Not exactly. It was off. Like it wanted to sound like me, but couldn't quite get it right. "They all look outside. You didn't. That's why you're still here." I stopped the video. Footsteps thudded above me. I ran. I didn't stop until I was locked in my room, lights off, door barricaded. That night, I didn't sleep. But I did hear the footsteps again. Only this time. They stopped right outside my bedroom door. The sound at my door wasn't a knock. It was slower than that. A dragging. Fingertips across the wood. I sat frozen on my bed, holding my breath, eyes locked on the handle. It twitched once. Just barely. Then, silence. No footsteps leaving. No creaking floorboards. Just silence. I waited until morning. When I opened the door, nothing was there. No marks. No scratches. But the hallway was colder than the rest of the house. And Toby refused to walk past it. That morning, I asked my neighbor if he'd ever heard anything strange at night. He didn't even hesitate. He just looked around to make sure no one else was listening, then said, "Don't be outside at 3:12. And don't ever open your door if you hear a knock. Even if it sounds like someone you know." I asked him what it was. He shook his head. "It doesn't come from anywhere. It is the place." Whatever that meant. That night, I stayed awake again. Not near the window this time. Not near the stairs. But I did leave my phone recording, propped against the front window, silently watching the street. At 3:12, the lights came on again. One by one. Then they went out. I didn't hear footsteps this time. But in the morning, when I checked the video, there was something new. A figure. Blurry. Standing still in the middle of the street. Facing the house. No face. No features. Just a dark silhouette. And then, frame by frame, it turned its head. Toward the camera. Toward me. I scrubbed through the video over and over. Frame by frame. That figure stood motionless in the middle of the street for almost 4 full minutes. Then, in a single, glitch-like jump, it was gone. No walking away. No fading. Just gone. My stomach dropped. Because right after that, barely visible in the reflection of the window, was me. Or something that looked like me. Standing behind the curtain. Staring at the figure. But I hadn't been near the window all night. I checked the mirror. My reflection was normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way it turned its head. Like it knew I was watching. Later that day, I noticed something strange. Everyone on our street seemed tense. Neighbors watered their lawns without saying hello. Some had taped black trash bags over their windows. I saw one man nailing his mailbox shut. When I asked my mom about it, she said something I'll never forget: they've seen themselves too. That night, I almost left. Almost packed my bags and drove out. But part of me needed to see it again. To understand it. So I waited. 3:12 a.m. Nothing. No lights. No footsteps. Just silence. Then, tap tap tap. My bedroom window. 3 soft knocks. I turned slowly. And there, just outside the glass, was me. Same pajamas. Same expression. Same eyes. But he wasn't knocking anymore. He was smiling. I didn't move. I couldn't. The figure behind the window, me, just stood there, smiling. Not waving. Not speaking. Just watching. Then he raised his hand. Not to wave, but to mirror mine. I lifted my right hand. So did he. I lifted my left. So did he. But then, I turned my head left. He turned his head right. Opposite. Not a reflection. Not a mirror. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, eyes still locked on the window. Then came the whisper. From inside the room. From behind me. If you see yourself, never turn your back. I spun around. No one there. When I turned back to the window, he was gone. No footprints. No sound. No nothing. Just the wind brushing through the hedges outside and the faint buzz of the porch light. I barely slept that night. The next morning, my mom was already in the kitchen. Before I said a word, she asked, "Did you see it?" I nodded. She handed me a folded slip of paper. Old. Yellowed. Almost brittle. It had only one sentence on it. Typed. If it knocks, it's still learning. If it smiles, it already knows you. I looked at her, terrified. She didn't say anything more. She just pointed to the attic. I stood at the base of the attic ladder for a long time. It was one of those pull-down staircases, dusty, creaking, surrounded by shadows that somehow felt thicker than the rest of the house. My mom had never mentioned the attic before. But now she pointed, calm as ever, like it had always been part of the plan. "There's something up there that belonged to it once," she said. "It keeps coming back for it." She wouldn't explain. So I climbed. Each step groaned under my weight as I ascended into the choking heat above. The attic was cramped, the air thick and still. My flashlight beam sliced through floating dust like a knife. Boxes. Old chairs. A broken ceiling fan. And something at the far end of the attic. A mirror. Tall. Covered in a gray sheet. I approached, slowly. I could feel something, pulling at me. Not physically, but emotionally. Like a memory trying to surface. Like a dream I couldn't quite shake. I pulled the sheet off. The mirror wasn't reflecting the attic. It was showing my bedroom. Live. Real time. But I wasn't in it. Something else was. It stood in the middle of the room, facing away from me. Same clothes. Same build. But its head was tilted, wrong. Too far to the side, like it had no bones. Then it turned. And smiled. The thing in the mirror, it wasn't just copying me anymore. It was studying me. That smile, it wasn't natural. It didn't reach the eyes. It just stretched too wide, like it had learned the shape of emotion without understanding the meaning behind it. Then, in the reflection, it took a step toward the bed. My bed. And I watched as it bent down, slowly, like it was examining something beneath the frame. My heart dropped. Because I'd hidden my phone there. Recording. Just in case. In the attic, I pulled the mirror back. The reflection didn't change. That thing reached under the bed and pulled out the phone. It looked straight into the screen. Then straight at me. Even though it was only a reflection, I felt it watching me through the glass, through time, somehow. Then it whispered something. I couldn't hear it in the attic. But when I raced back downstairs, heart pounding, and checked the phone, the recording had saved. And on it, clear as day, was the whisper, "You're almost ready." That night, I tried to warn someone. Anyone. I texted friends. Posted online. No responses. I walked to the neighbor's house across the street. Lights were on. TV was flickering in the living room. I knocked. Waited. Knocked again. The door opened. And I stood there. Same pajamas. Same expression. Only this time, he didn't smile. He just said, calmly, "You're out of place." And shut the door. I ran. back across the street, up the porch, into the house, locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking. The windows all felt closer, like the walls had moved, like the house itself had shrunk around me. I heard it again, 3:12 a.m. The clock chimed without sound. The lights outside began to flicker. One by one. Then the hallway light. Then the basement light. Then the light behind me. I turned. Slowly. There I was, standing in the hallway. But it wasn't me. The thing had grown taller. Limbs longer. Mouth wider. Like it was learning to be me, but still didn't have it right. It tilted its head and whispered, almost perfect. I turned and ran, upstairs, into my room, slammed the door, pushed the dresser in front of it. But before I could move again, the mirror in my closet flickered. And he stepped out. The other me. No sound. No rush. Just presence. He raised his hand, pointed to the window. And I saw them. Dozens of them. Figures, all with my face. Walking. Crawling. Waiting. All in perfect silence. All at 3:12. The one in my room leaned in close and whispered, almost lovingly, "You stayed too long." Then everything went black. I woke up in my bed. Sunlight. Birds. No damage. No phone. No messages. Like nothing had happened. Only the clock beside my bed kept flashing. 3:12 over and over. And when I looked in the mirror, I smiled. But I wasn't the one smiling. I took the job because it paid well. Night security for a gated community, easy money. Sit in a booth, watch some monitors, report anything unusual. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. Perfect for someone like me who needed quiet. The neighborhood was called Hollow Pines. Expensive houses. Manicured lawns. Streetlights that looked like antique gas lamps. The kind of place where every driveway had a luxury car and every doorbell had a camera. The first night was uneventful. I walked the perimeter. Checked the gates. Sipped coffee in the booth and watched as porch lights flicked off one by one. But around 3 a.m., something strange happened. Unit 17's doorbell rang. Then Unit 22. Then Unit 9. All within minutes of each other. The screens lit up in front of me, showing camera feeds from each door. No one was there. Just the empty porches. Swings creaking slightly in the wind. Motion lights flickering on. But not a single person in sight. I radioed the residents to check in. Some answered groggily. Some didn't answer at all. But the common complaint? Someone rang our bell, but nobody was there. I logged the incident. Marked it as a technical glitch. Told myself it was probably a system error. But just before my shift ended, as the sky turned gray, every doorbell rang at once. All 26 homes. All at the exact same second. The monitors blinked, static flashing through them like a bad transmission. Then they all went black. The screen stayed black for 23 seconds. I counted. Then, one by one, they flickered back to life. Everything looked normal again. Porches empty. Lights still. No movement. Just silence. I should have reported it to the head of security, but I didn't. It was my first night, and I didn't want to sound paranoid. So I logged it as a system overload, too many signals at once. The next night was quiet. Until 3:12 a.m. Then the doorbell started again. This time, in a perfect sequence. One after another, every 10 seconds. Like something was walking house to house. The footage showed nothing. No wind. No bugs. No people. Just the quiet hum of wealthy silence. But as each bell rang, something else started happening. The porch lights, they didn't just turn on. They stayed on. And in a few of them, the motion detectors were triggered. On the monitors, I watched as toys moved slightly on their own. A child's tricycle rolled a few inches forward. A swing began to sway, even though the air was still. Then Unit 4's camera, it glitched. For half a second, the screen scrambled. And in that split second of static, I saw something. A figure. Not clear. Blurry. Like it was only there between frames. It stood at the door, motionless. And then the doorbell rang again. Even though no one was there. I rewound the footage from Unit 4. Frame by frame. Most of it was empty. But for one single frame, so brief I almost missed it, something stood at the edge of the porch light. It didn't look like a person. Too tall. Too thin. No features. Just a silhouette. Like it was made of absence. When I paused it, the shape seemed to distort the space around it, like heat rising off asphalt. The lines of the porch bent slightly, unnaturally, as if the figure was too much for the camera to process. I printed the frame and stuffed it in my backpack. The next morning, I drove around the neighborhood before leaving. I stopped at Unit 4. Normal house. Freshly cut grass. Wind chimes on the porch. But the doorbell casing? It was melted. Slightly warped around the button, like someone had pressed it with something burning hot. I touched it. Still warm. I asked the family who lived there if they'd noticed anything strange. The woman who answered looked pale. Tired. She didn't open the door fully. "It rings every night," she whispered. We stopped answering. Before I could ask anything else, she closed the door. Back at the booth that night, I watched the monitors even more carefully. Took notes. Marked the time. The doorbell started again. But this time, one of the feeds, Unit 9, didn't just flicker. It cut out entirely. Then, seconds later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. A whisper. "Come outside." I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just held the phone against my ear and listened. The whisper repeated, softer this time, "Come outside." I ended the call. Tried to calm myself. Told myself it was a prank, maybe a resident messing with me. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. On the monitor, Unit 9's camera feed was still out. Then, slowly, another feed flickered and died. Unit 10. Then Unit 11. A trail, moving down the street. Whatever it was coming closer. House by house, camera by camera, darkness spreading through the system. By the time it reached Unit 15, I stood up and stepped back from the monitors. Then, everything went black. The booth lost power. Total silence. Even the hum of the security system disappeared. Then the doorbell on the booth rang. I didn't even know the booth had a doorbell. But it rang. Once. Then again. Ding dong. Followed by 3 soft knocks. I stood frozen in the dark, unable to breathe. No lights. No screens. Just me, alone, with that sound. And then, a whisper. Not through the phone this time. From the intercom. The same voice, more confident now, "Come outside. We left something for you." I don't know why I opened the door. Curiosity? Stupidity? Or something worse, some force that wanted me to comply. The moment I stepped outside, I realized how quiet it was. No bugs. No wind. Even the fountains lining the main street had stopped running. Everything was still. My flashlight cut through the dark like a blade. I scanned the area. Empty sidewalks. Quiet homes. A faint fog rolling low across the lawns. Then I saw it. Something at the foot of the security booth stairs. A package. Wrapped in paper that looked old. Like it had soaked up too much moisture and had dried back wrong. No address. No stamp. Just my name, written in perfect block letters across the top. I didn't want to touch it. But I couldn't leave it either. So I brought it inside, shut the door, and used my pocket knife to cut it open. Inside was a recording tape. An old cassette. Unlabeled. And a folded note that read, "Play this at 3:12 a.m. Do not rewind." There was no cassette player in the booth, but I remembered there was one in the maintenance shack at the edge of the property. I checked the time. 3:06. I grabbed the tape, locked up, and sprinted across the silent street. The shack was dark, but my keycard worked. Inside, the smell of mold and dust hit me like a wall. But the cassette player was there, sitting on a dusty desk like it hadn't been touched in years. I slid the tape in. 3:12. The second I hit play, the lights cut out. And something on the tape began to breathe. It wasn't just breathing. It was right next to the microphone. Heavy. Wet. Like lungs too deep for a human chest. Then came the whisper. Not a voice I recognized. Low. Raspy. Like it had never spoken before. "We remember the first house." I froze. The tape hissed. "We remember the door that opened." I reached for the stop button, but the player wouldn't respond. The buttons jammed. The lights stayed dead. "Now we knock on all of them." Suddenly, on the tape, doorbells. Dozens of them. Echoing one after another, some sharp, some distorted. Then knocks. Fast. Desperate. Hundreds of hands knocking all at once. Then a scream. Short. Cut off. Not from the tape. From outside the shack. I jumped back, heart hammering. The shack door creaked slightly. Someone, or something, was trying to open it slowly. Then silence. Then, ding-dong. Right outside the maintenance shack door. I turned the cassette player off. This time it obeyed. Darkness. Stillness. I waited. Then a shadow moved across the frosted window. It didn't pass. It just stood there. Watching. The shadow didn't flinch. Didn't knock again. Just stood outside the frosted glass, its outline almost human, but wrong in subtle ways. Too tall. Too narrow at the joints. Its head moved slightly, like it was listening. Waiting. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. Then it did something I'll never forget. It raised its hand and tapped once on the glass. Not hard. Just enough to let me know. It knew I was inside. I backed up, quietly, reaching for the emergency flashlight. The batteries were low, but it flickered on. When I turned back, the shadow was gone. I peeked through the crack in the door. The path was empty. No footprints. No movement. But the cassette player had turned itself back on. It was playing again. Only this time, the message had changed. A woman's voice. Soft. Familiar. It's inside one of them now. One of the houses. Don't knock. Don't ring. Don't answer. Then silence. I pulled the tape out and stuffed it in my pocket, heart still racing. I didn't know what the message meant, but I had a terrible feeling. This wasn't random. Whatever was ringing the bells, it had gotten in. And someone had already let it. By the time I got back to the booth, the screens had rebooted. All feeds were online, except one. Unit 7. No signal. I pulled up the backup cameras. Still nothing. Black screen, no audio. Just a dull hum like the system was struggling to connect. I decided to check it out. Unit 7 was at the far end of the neighborhood, past a small cul-de-sac lined with pine trees. The kind of house that looked untouched by time, perfect hedges, porch lights always on. But tonight, the lights were off. Completely. As I approached, I noticed something odd. The front door was open just a crack. No light inside. No sound. I radioed it in. Control, this is booth 1. Unit 7 has a door ajar. No signs of forced entry, but requesting confirmation before proceeding. No response. Just static. I waited. Nothing. I stepped closer. That's when I noticed it, on the porch, right by the welcome mat, burn marks. Perfect black circles where the wood had been seared. As if someone, or something, had stood there, burning slowly through the floor. I called out. No answer. I pushed the door open with my foot. The air inside was ice cold. Colder than outside. Colder than the AC could possibly make it. And it smelled, like rain on asphalt, but wrong. Metallic. Artificial. I stepped inside. And heard the sound I dreaded, ding-dong. The doorbell. But I was already in the house. The doorbell rang again. From inside the house. I turned slowly toward the sound. It wasn't coming from the front entrance. It echoed deeper inside, like it was being triggered from the walls themselves. I called out once more. Still no answer. The living room was immaculate, too perfect. Couch pillows aligned, candles unused, a TV remote sitting centered on the coffee table. Everything untouched, except the mirror above the fireplace. It was cracked. A single fracture running straight through the middle. But there was no sign of impact. And when I stepped closer, I saw something that stopped me cold. My reflection wasn't mine. Same clothes. Same build. But the expression was off, blank, like it didn't know how to smile anymore. Its eyes were too dark, too sunken, and behind it. Behind it was another room. Not the one I was in. A narrow hallway, dimly lit. Something moved at the end of it, walking slowly toward the reflection. I spun around, nothing behind me. I turned back to the mirror. The hallway was closer now. Whatever was in it had taken several steps. Still too dark to see its face, but it was tall. Wrong. And it was holding something. Then my reflection, it turned and ran. Without me moving. The glass shattered. I stumbled back, heart hammering. And then, the door slammed shut behind me. Locked. And from somewhere upstairs, ding-dong. Ding dong. It echoed from upstairs again. My instincts screamed at me to leave. But the front door was locked tight, sealed like it hadn't been opened in years. I even tried the windows, nailed shut from the inside. So I climbed the staircase. Every step creaked beneath my weight. The air grew colder the higher I went, like the house didn't want me there. At the top of the stairs, the hallway was dark, except for one room at the end. Its door was wide open. Inside, a faint blue glow spilled out. As I stepped closer, I saw what was causing the light, a monitor. An old one. Cathode ray, flickering. Connected to a security camera feed. The footage was live. Of me. Standing right there, outside the room. I looked behind me. Nothing. Then, slowly, the feed began to shift. It zoomed out, revealing the entire hallway behind me. I saw myself on the screen. Breathing. Frozen. Watching. And then, another figure appeared behind me. On the screen, not in real life. But I felt it. Breathing against my neck. I turned quickly, still nothing. But on the screen, it was still there. Too close. I turned back to the monitor just in time to watch the screen glitch, then go black. The hallway lights flickered out. And all at once, every doorbell in the house began to ring. Faster. Louder. Unending. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. Then, silence. I don't remember how I got out. I just remember waking up outside the booth, cold sweat soaking through my uniform. The monitors were back on. Unit 7's feed? Still dead. The cassette tape? Gone. The houses? Silent. I quit that morning. But last night, I got a package at my apartment door. No return address. Just a note inside, there's one more door left. And taped to the back, a new cassette. The end. I found the listing online. No company name. No contact information. Just a plain message, night security needed. No experience required. $1,000 per week. Cash. Remote site. Must be okay with isolation. Must not open door 6 under any circumstance. It sounded like a joke. Or bait for something worse. But I was broke. Rent was overdue, my fridge was empty, and my phone had 3% battery left when I replied. They answered within minutes. Coordinates. A name, Black Ridge Research Annex. And a time. Arrive at 8:30 p.m. sharp. Leave at 5 a.m. sharp. No exceptions. That night, I drove 2 hours into the hills. No signage. Just a chain-link fence around a flat concrete building, maybe 3 stories tall, half buried into the landscape. Cold steel door. Camera above it. The second I stepped out of my car, the door clicked open. Inside, it smelled like dust and ammonia. Stark fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A uniform and badge lay on the counter. Temporary access, night shift, D. Wells. There was a logbook. Instructions: stay in the security office unless doing patrols, patrol every hour, log all camera activity, never open door 6, do not respond to knocking from inside it. That last line was circled several times. I didn't see any other doors labeled with numbers, not yet. But when I reached the main hallway, I noticed one at the far end. Steel-plated. Reinforced hinges. Massive deadbolts. and in thick red stenciled paint. Door 6. Even from a distance, door 6 felt wrong. The air near it was colder. Not by much, but enough to notice. Like standing in front of a walk-in freezer that hummed with something alive inside. I tried not to stare. Just walked past, continuing my first patrol like a good employee. The hallway lights flickered slightly as I passed under them. It felt like the building was holding its breath. Back in the security office, I locked the door behind me, just in case, and scanned the room. One large desk. A bank of dusty monitors showing grainy black and white footage. The entire facility was mostly empty. A few storage rooms, a lab, the loading dock, a break room. Camera 9 was fixed on door 6. I pulled out the logbook. The previous guard's entries were brief. Efficient. 2,300, nothing. 0000, nothing. 0100, heard humming near 6. Did not approach. 0200, footsteps outside 6. Ignored. 0300, knocking. 3 times. Didn't answer. That was the last entry. The next page was blank. I checked the time. 11:57 p.m. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once. Then again. On the monitor, camera 9 glitched. The image warped for a second, like static tearing across the screen, and then steadied again. Door 6. Still shut. I leaned closer. There was something off. A shadow, maybe? Just at the bottom edge of the screen. Low. Unmoving. Like someone crouched in front of the door just outside the camera's reach. I flipped through older pages of the logbook, looking for anything else. One note stood out, written in red ink: if the door knocks twice, ignore it. If it knocks 3 times, pray. I didn't like that. And right then, knock. One sharp, solid knock echoed down the hall. I froze. 10 seconds later, knock. I turned to the monitor. Camera 9 was black. I tapped the side of the monitor. Nothing. Just black. The feed wasn't flickering. It wasn't static. It was simply gone, like someone had unplugged the camera, or worse, like it was never connected to begin with. Another knock. Third. It was softer than the first 2, but more deliberate. Slow. Almost polite. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. The hallway outside the office was silent, but I could feel it. Something was out there. Waiting. Listening. I reached over and flipped the switch that killed all interior lights on the monitors. The facility faded to black and white outlines, lit only by the night vision cameras. Every hallway empty. Every door still. All except one. Door 6. Camera 9 flickered back to life. The shadow was gone. But now, the door was slightly open. No alarms had gone off. No motion sensor triggered. And yet there it was, open by maybe 2 inches, revealing nothing but blackness inside. I scrambled to the logbook. If door 6 opens on its own, do not approach. Do not look inside. The page had been ripped at the edge, as if someone tore it out in a panic. I grabbed the receiver to the security intercom system, half hoping someone else was online. Nothing but static. The digital clock on the wall ticked to 12 a.m. The facility's lights dimmed for half a second, then surged back. And then, across every monitor, a single message appeared in red block letters: Door 6 breached. Initiate containment. I didn't know what that meant. No instructions. No backup. No fail-safe. Just me. And something that had just walked through that door. My hands hovered over the control panel, unsure of what to press, what to lock, what to shut down. I wasn't trained for this. No one had said anything about containment procedures. No panic buttons. No manual. Just $1,000 a week and one rule: don't open door 6. But now it was open. Something had broken that rule. The monitors glitched again, this time all of them. Every feed cut to static for a single breath, then came back on, but the angles had changed. They were no longer pointing at the hallways. They were pointing at me. Every monitor. From impossible perspectives. Overhead. Behind me. Even a shot from just outside the office door. I turned in my chair slowly, heart pounding in my ears. The hallway behind the security office was empty. Silent. I stood, grabbed the flashlight, and checked my sidearm. One full magazine. Safety on. My hand shook as I clicked it off. I wasn't going to leave the office. But I had to know if something was coming. That's when the speaker above the door crackled to life. A voice, distorted and wrong, whispered through it, "David, that wasn't my name." But the badge on the counter said it was. D. Wells. I stepped back from the door. Come see. Just a peek. Just a lesson. It was calm. Inviting. Like a teacher luring a child out of hiding. I slammed the intercom switch off. The voice kept coming. Not from the speaker anymore. From the hallway itself. Closer. Then the lights flickered. One. By. One. Going dark toward the office door. And in that strobe of dying light, for a split second, I saw a figure. Slender. Tilting its head. Smiling. Waiting. The lights died completely, and I was left in a darkness so thick it felt wet. My flashlight clicked on with a weak beam, barely cutting through the pitch. I aimed it at the door's tiny window. Nothing. But my skin crawled. I could feel eyes on me. Not just from outside the office, but from inside, too. I spun, scanning the room. Still alone. At least, I thought I was. Then the window in the office door darkened. Something moved in front of it. Not a person. Too tall. Too still. It didn't breathe. Didn't sway. Just stood there, pressing against the glass, fogging it up with nothing. I stepped back. Then the glass cracked. Just slightly. One long fracture down the center, like pressure was being applied from the other side. I raised my gun and aimed it at the door. The cracking stopped. For now. I reached for the radio again, flipping through channels. Static. Static. More static. Then, channel 7. A voice. Faint. Raspy. Urgent. Don't look at it, keep the door shut, it knows your name now. The line went dead. My blood froze. The monitors blinked again. One of them, camera 5, showed a new image. A room I hadn't seen before. It wasn't labeled. No time stamp. Just a bare concrete space. One chair. One desk. And something in the corner. Curled. Shaking. Then the camera glitched. When it came back, the chair was facing the camera. And in it, was me. Same uniform. Same flashlight. Same frozen expression. Only, he smiled, raised a hand, and waved. I staggered back from the monitor, knocking over the chair behind me. The image on the screen didn't change. It just kept smiling. Waving. Like it had been waiting for me to notice. I unplugged the monitor. The screen stayed on. I yanked the cable from the wall, still on. The image flickered once. Then the other me on the screen leaned in closer, his face distorting as if pressing against a sheet of glass. His mouth moved, slowly. I couldn't hear it. But I knew what he was saying. Let me in. Suddenly, all 8 monitors switched to that same feed. 8 angles of the same room. 8 identical copies of me. Waving, smiling, whispering. The lights in the office turned red. No switch triggered. No circuit fault. They chose red. The overhead speaker crackled again. Not with voice, this time, with sound. A rhythmic tapping. 3 taps. Then 2. Then 3 again. It matched something. I realized it too late. It was the same pattern the door to the security office made when unlocking. I lunged for the handle, too late. Click. The lock disengaged. The door creaked open by an inch. I raised my weapon, aiming with trembling hands. Nothing entered. But a paper slid under the door. Plain. Folded. I knelt slowly, picked it up, and opened it with care. There was only one sentence. Written in smeared ink, "You've already opened it." Behind me, the monitor buzzed, one final message replacing every screen: "Welcome to Door 7." Door 7? There was no Door 7. At least, not when I arrived. I turned slowly to the office door. It was open now, just slightly, like it had been that whole time. The hallway outside was bathed in that same red light. Nothing moved. And yet, everything felt different. I stepped out, sweeping the flashlight side to side. The hall was longer than before. Much longer. The bend at the far end, where door 6 should have been, was gone, replaced by a single endless corridor, stretching straight ahead, too far to see the end. No sound. No footsteps. Not even the low hum of electricity anymore. Just silence. The kind that hurt your ears. Every 10 steps or so, there was a door. Steel. Identical. Each marked with a number. 5, 6. 6, 6. 7. That was impossible. I walked past the first door 6. It was sealed tight. I passed the second. Same. The third door 6 had scratches on it. Deep ones. Something had clawed at it from the inside. Or, from the outside trying to keep something in. I didn't stop. When I reached door 7, my flashlight flickered. The red lights above dimmed, almost reacting to me. The air smelled different here, like burnt paper and salt. And on the door itself, someone had etched something into the metal. Not a warning. A name. D. Wells, my name. Or the one they'd given me. Suddenly, behind me, running. Fast. Barefoot. Slapping the tile. I turned, gun raised, light swinging through the corridor, nothing. Just the hum of door 7 vibrating slightly. Breathing. I reached out with a shaking hand. And the door opened by itself. The door didn't creak. It sighed. As if it had been waiting a long time to be opened, too long. Beyond it, there was no hallway. No room. Just blackness. Not the kind your eyes adjust to, but a void that swallowed the flashlight's beam whole. A living dark. I stood at the threshold, my instinct screaming to close it and run. But my legs disobeyed. Something beyond the door pulled at me, not physically, but through memory. Emotion. Familiarity. A whisper slid across the back of my neck. You've been here before. My mind flashed. For just a second, I saw a child's drawing. Crayon lines. A stick figure standing outside a tall, square building. Big red letters above it, Blackridge. The figure was smiling. Holding a flashlight. The name beneath it, David. My knees buckled. That name again. David Wells. Why did it feel like it belonged to someone else, and me? I stepped forward. The darkness accepted me. No walls. No floor. Yet I didn't fall. Instead, lights flickered on in the distance, old, humming fluorescent tubes suspended in the void, forming a jagged path of suspended tiles and wires. I walked. One step. Then another. And then I saw it. A desk. In the center of the nothing. On it, a folder labeled, Temp File, D. Wells. I opened it. Inside were dozens of photos. Me, in the uniform. Me at the monitor. Me sleeping at the desk. Photos from angles that shouldn't exist. At the bottom, one final photo. Not of me, but of a boy. Standing outside a school. Same eyes. Same expression. Same badge. The caption, Subject 27, Returning Cycle. Behind me, something exhaled. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs, but nothing was there. Just the empty path of floating floor tiles stretching back into darkness. No door. No walls. No way out. The folder slipped from my hands. Pages fluttered like feathers, disappearing into the black beneath me. Gone. And then, the lights started shutting off. One by one. From behind. Coming closer. Like something was following me, slowly. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it gaining. The lights ahead flickered violently as I sprinted across the fragile path. Somewhere behind me, something heavy stepped onto the tiles, bending them with weight that didn't belong in this world. I reached the end of the light. Another door. Floating. Steel. Door 8 stamped across it in massive red letters. No knob. No handle. Just a biometric scanner blinking red. I slapped my hand against it. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. A whisper surrounded me. You're not him anymore. I screamed. Banged on the door. Slammed the butt of my flashlight against the scanner. Behind me, tiles began to crumble. The sound of teeth grinding filled the air. The scanner blinked green. The door opened inward into blinding white light. I dove through just as the last tile gave way, and I was falling. Not down. Sideways. The light bent. Twisted. Pulled my body like clay. I landed hard. On linoleum. A hallway. Flickering lights. Peeling posters on the wall. The smell of disinfectant and crayons. And somewhere, faintly, the sound of a school bell. The bell echoed down the corridor, high-pitched and mechanical, followed by the faint shuffle of feet. I lay still, listening. The air smelled like old pencils and dust. Like elementary school. But it wasn't empty. Somewhere down that hallway, I could hear faint whispers. Children's voices. Laughing. Chanting something in a sing-song rhythm, too quiet to understand. I stood, legs trembling, and took in my surroundings. The hallway was narrow and long. Faded classroom doors lined both sides, some with broken glass, others ajar. Hand-drawn artwork peeled from the walls, smiling suns, wobbly stick figures, red houses with blue skies. None of them had faces. I stepped forward, careful not to make a sound. My flashlight was gone. In its place was a small plastic ruler, tucked into my back pocket like it belonged there. It had bite marks on it. I didn't remember putting it there. The intercom buzzed above me, an old rusted speaker. A voice crackled through it, warped by static, subject Wells. Late again. I froze. The intercom popped once and went silent. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost crept along the edges of the lockers beside me. And from the nearest classroom came a slow, dragging sound, like something wet being pulled across tile. A hand reached around the doorframe. Small. Child-sized. But gray. Wrinkled. Twitching. It was followed by a face. No eyes. Just smooth skin where they should have been. A stitched mouth opened slightly, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Then the child turned its head, too far, like an owl, and sniffed the air. It smiled. And whispered, "He's here." A dozen classroom doors slammed open in unison. Little footsteps began running toward me. I bolted. The hallway twisted as I ran, literally. Angles shifted. Walls bent in ways they shouldn't. Every turn led to another row of lockers, another row of doors slamming open behind me. The children's footsteps followed. Dozens of them. Pattering. Scraping. Clicking. Their laughter echoed, warped like a broken tape, looping over itself. Ready or not, ready or not, ready or... I threw open a door at random and ducked inside. Classroom 2B. Empty desks. Chalkboard stained with old math equations. A lone overhead projector still hummed in the back. I slammed the door shut, locking it, pushing a cabinet in front of it for good measure. Silence. The footsteps stopped outside. Then one, gentle knock. Then another. Then the sound of tiny fingernails dragging across the door. Something brushed against the glass window in the top of the door, too short to look in. I backed away, breathing hard, clutching the ruler without knowing why. Then I noticed the blackboard. Words had appeared, written in fresh white chalk. You were never a guard. You were always a student. The bell rang again. Only this time, it wasn't from the hallway. It was inside the room. I turned slowly. In the far corner, where the projector buzzed, something stood in the shadow. Tall. Emaciated. Wearing a cracked porcelain mask shaped like a child's smiling face. Too wide. Too smooth. It wore a teacher's robe. Tattered, covered in what looked like old hall passes. It raised one long finger to its lips. Then it began walking toward me. Each step erased the floor beneath it. I stumbled backward, heart racing, trying not to scream. The thing in the teacher's robe moved like liquid wrapped in skin, each step precise, silent, and wrong. The floor tiles beneath its feet disintegrated, vanishing into black mist. I didn't know where to go. The door was blocked. The windows were bricked over. I was trapped. It raised its hand again, palm open, and pointed at the blackboard. The chalk moved on its own. "Write your name." I shook my head, trembling. The porcelain mask tilted to the side. A low, vibrating hum filled the room, like a tuning fork buried in bone. The desks began to shake. Drawers slid open. Pencils and broken crayons rolled out. The projector flared, casting my shadow across the wall. But it wasn't mine. It was younger. Smaller. The figure on the wall held a ruler. Same one. Same teeth marks. It turned its head toward me and smiled. "Write it," the chalk spelled again. Faster this time. Desperate. I took a piece from the tray. My hand moved without my consent, scrawling out shaky letters. D. Wells. The second I finished, the room went silent. The teacher stopped mid-step. Then slowly lowered its hand. From behind the mask came a voice, childlike, but distorted. "Correct. Begin your lesson." The desks rearranged themselves in perfect rows. The door swung open on its own. Outside, the hallway looked different again, cleaner. Newer. Bright lights. Fresh paint. At the far end stood a figure in a suit, holding a clipboard. He waved me over. "Mr. Wells, your class is waiting." I didn't move. The man in the suit stood perfectly still, clipboard tucked neatly under one arm, his other hand raised in a polite beckon. His face was featureless, like it had been sketched in faint pencil and then partially erased. Behind him, a door stood wide open. Bright light poured from within. Children's laughter drifted out, but it was wrong. Repetitive. Artificial. The same giggle looped every few seconds, like a faulty sound file. I stepped into the hallway. The classroom behind me faded into mist, leaving only the door I'd come through. And ahead, only that man. I walked slowly, trying to make sense of the surroundings. The hallway looked brand new. Linoleum spotless. Lockers shiny. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly. Everything too perfect, like a simulation frozen in time. The clipboard man turned, walked through the open door, and vanished. I followed. Inside was a classroom, but not any I'd seen before. The windows were blacked out. Every desk was occupied. The children all wore identical uniforms, gray, too clean. Too still. They didn't blink. Didn't breathe. They just watched me. One seat was empty at the front. The blackboard behind the desk was covered in writing, in hundreds of overlapping hands. "Teach us how to leave. Teach us how to remember. Teach us how to forget." I turned to leave. The door was gone. In its place was a wall. A small TV flickered on behind the desk. It showed security camera footage. Of me. Still seated in the guard station. Staring at the monitors. Not moving. Not breathing. Not alive. The classroom door opened again behind me. A voice whispered. "We took your body. Now teach with your mind." I backed into the corner, heart hammering as the children turned their heads in unison to face me. Their necks moved too smoothly, like joints that had been oiled too well. No blinking. No expression. Just those cold, glassy eyes, locked on mine. The TV behind me continued to play. Security feed. Static. Then my body, seated in the security chair, began to twitch. One hand moved. Then the head tilted. Slowly, unnaturally. I looked away. The blackboard had changed again. This time, just one sentence: begin the lesson or become one of us. The walls pulsed, actually pulsed, like a lung taking in air. The classroom lights dimmed. From the back, one child stood. A girl with a jagged crack across her forehead, like broken porcelain. She raised her hand, stiff and shaky. "Mr. Wells, why did you open the door?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. Then another student rose. A boy, face too smooth, lips sewn shut. He didn't speak, but his question was louder than the first. "Why did you come back?" I stumbled to the desk, gripping its edge for balance. There was a book on it, titled Cycle 27, Instructor Notes. I opened it. Pages filled with identical scrawls. Diagrams. Names. Times. Warnings. And at the bottom of every page, stamped in red, "Lesson failed. Reset scheduled." The floor trembled. Desks scraped forward on their own. The students leaned in. One by one, they whispered, "Teach us. Teach us. Teach us." The lights shut off. The TV blinked off. And in total darkness, a voice I hadn't heard before whispered, right behind my ear, "This is the last chance." Darkness pressed in from all sides. Not just the absence of light, but something heavier. A darkness that felt like it was watching, like it had its own shape, its own breath. I couldn't see the children anymore. But I could hear them. Breathing in perfect rhythm. Waiting. The desk beneath my fingers grew cold. Ice spread across its surface, veins of frost racing toward the book. The pages turned on their own, faster and faster, until they stopped at a blank page. A pencil rolled toward me. I didn't want to touch it. But my hand moved anyway. As I pressed the tip to the paper, the air shifted. I no longer felt like I was standing in the classroom. The floor was gone. The sounds were gone. Only the whisper remained, "Write the first rule." My hand moved without command. 1. Do not open door 6. The second I finished writing it, the pencil snapped in half. From the void around me came a slow applause. Sarcastic. Mocking. Then another voice, deeper than any before, growled, "And yet you did." Suddenly, the lights returned, but not as before. Now the classroom was decayed. Rotting. Desks overturned. Wallpaper peeled. Mold crept along every surface. The children were still seated. But now they were skeletal. Hollow. Empty uniforms draped over bone and cloth. All facing me. All smiling. The teacher from before, the one with the porcelain mask, stood at the front again. It bowed slowly, then extended its hand toward the blackboard, which now read, "Final exam, escape." One door appeared behind me. Painted red. Smoke leaked from its edges. I didn't want to open it. But I knew I would. I always did. The red door pulsed like a heartbeat. Smoke curled from the edges, thick and oily, slithering across the floor toward my shoes. The skeletal students didn't move. They simply watched. Judging. Waiting. The porcelain-faced teacher stepped aside, gesturing elegantly toward the door, as if this had all been part of the curriculum. I reached for the handle. It was warm. No, not warm. Alive. It pulsed beneath my fingers, and for a split second, I swore I felt another hand on the other side, gripping back. I turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a long corridor lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed like insects in a jar. The smell hit me instantly: smoke, rubber, something burnt and sweet. I stepped through. The door slammed shut behind me with such force it knocked dust from the ceiling. Ahead, the hallway twisted downward like a spiral staircase flattened into a tunnel. Along the walls, framed photos. All of them of me. Or people who looked almost like me. Uniformed, hollow-eyed, frozen mid-scream, mid-run, mid-breath. At the bottom, another door. This one plain. Unlabeled. But I recognized it. The guard station. I pushed through and stepped back into the original room. The monitors were dark. The chair sat empty. But the screens flickered on. Every one of them now showed footage from the classroom. Live. I could see the desks, the chalkboard, the red door, and sitting at the teacher's desk, me. Not me now. The me from before. Blinking. Breathing. Just beginning his shift. I looked down at my hands. Dusty. Older. Faded. And then I saw the logbook on the counter. Open. A fresh entry written in handwriting I didn't remember writing. Cycle 28 begins. My breath caught. Cycle 28. Had there been 27 before me? Or had I been all 27? The question twisted in my head like barbed wire. I looked again at the monitors. The version of me on the screen yawned, took a sip of coffee, and tapped lazily at the keyboard. He had no idea what was coming. I reached for the mic to the PA system. But it was rusted. Fused in place. And deep inside me, a terrible truth began to bloom. I wasn't watching him. He was watching me. Every screen flickered. The angle reversed. Now I was the one sitting in the chair. Now I was the one sipping coffee. But I wasn't moving. I was frozen. Still. Like a photograph waiting to fade. A sound snapped me out of it, paper rustling behind me. I turned. Another folder had appeared on the desk. Same label. D. Wells, Post-Lesson Debrief. Inside, a single page, subject has accepted position. Memory fragment stable. Return to classroom for reorientation. I stood. My legs moved too easily. As if someone had already scripted my steps. The hallway outside was glowing with warm yellow light. I heard children laughing again. Playful. Joyful. But hollow. Like a recording buried beneath static. As I stepped out of the station, I passed a mirror mounted crooked on the wall. I stopped. The reflection wasn't mine. It was the porcelain-faced teacher. Staring back at me. It lifted a finger to its lips. And then it cracked, splintering like ice on a frozen lake, until only my face remained. Smiling. Accepting. The hallway welcomed me like an old friend. Its walls no longer decayed, but pristine. Freshly painted in soft pastels. The smell of crayons and disinfectant returned. Children's drawings fluttered gently on bulletin boards. But none of them had faces. Every hallway turn led me deeper into the familiar. Or the forgotten. Until finally, I reached the classroom. Room 2B. Same number as before. But this time, the door was open. The lights were on. And the desks were full. The children turned to me in perfect unison. Smiling. Waiting. My seat at the front had changed. It was no longer the wooden teacher's desk. It was a throne. Black, old, bound in leather and chains, yet elegant, like something salvaged from a forgotten cathedral. I sat. The class did not blink. The blackboard behind me lit on its own. 3 words appeared: begin final cycle. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I raised my hand, and the chalk floated up, scribbling on its own. Rule 1, you are already here. Rule 2, do not trust the exits. Rule 3, no one ever leaves. The children nodded. Then one by one, they began to dissolve, into ash, into mist, into paper-thin silhouettes that floated toward the ceiling and vanished through the flickering lights. Except for one. A small boy, seated in the far corner. He stared at me with recognition. Same uniform. Same ruler. Same tired eyes. He whispered, "Is it over?" I wanted to say yes. But my voice was gone. The lights went out. The darkness felt different this time. Not empty, but full. Like I was standing inside someone else's memory. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly with a rhythm I could feel in my spine. I turned toward where the boy had been seated. Gone. His desk sat empty again, dust swirling around it in lazy spirals. A low hum built around me, like a generator powering up, or a storm about to begin. Then a sound. Chalk. Scratching. Behind me. I turned slowly toward the blackboard. Words were forming on their own, shaky at first, then clearer. He is asking the wrong question. I frowned. Before I could react, the floor lurched, sending desks sliding, papers flying. The classroom began to peel apart, walls separating into long strips of colorless light. I reached for the desk to steady myself, but it wasn't there anymore. Instead, I stood in the hallway again. But this time, it was real. Lights flickered overhead. A janitor's mop bucket tipped in the corner. The intercom buzzed. Security to room 2B. Unusual activity reported. My earpiece crackled. A voice, my own, spoke on the other end, on it. I'll check it out. I looked down. I was holding a flashlight again. Wearing the uniform. Standing in the same spot I had that first night. No one around me reacted. Teachers passed in the distance. A student ran to class. Everything was normal. Too normal. I turned to the classroom door. Room 2B. Closed. Silent. But now, there was something carved deep into the wood, like it had been scratched by fingernails over and over again. Open last. My hand reached for the knob. It was warm. Just like before. My fingers curled around the doorknob of room 2B. It pulsed. Once. Twice. A heartbeat. The hallway behind me was silent now. No voices. No bells. No echo of life. The world had shrunk to this single door and the space just behind it. Open last was carved again beneath my hand, deeper now. Fresher. I turned the knob. The door didn't swing open. It collapsed inward, like a cardboard set piece, revealing an empty void that stretched into forever. No classroom. No desks. Just windless black and the faint shimmer of something massive far in the distance, something mechanical and ancient, spinning slowly. In the center, floating miles away yet somehow right in front of me, was the throne. My throne. Waiting. I stepped inside. There was no falling this time. The void accepted me. Below, I could see fragments of my cycles, reflections of each version of me that had ever walked this path, the frightened rookie, the reluctant teacher, the student, the ghost. all spiraling together, all folding inward like a dying star. The throne called to me. I sat. Chains wrapped around my wrists, not with force, but with familiarity. They slid into place like I'd worn them before. The spinning machine beyond slowed. Stopped. A single light blinked in the distance. A console appeared before me. Just a single red button. Labeled, Begin Cycle 29. I stared. Waited. Some part of me hoped for a voice, a sign, anything. But nothing came. Because there never was a voice. There never was a choice. There was only the next lesson. I reached out. Pressed the button. And once again, somewhere in another hallway, a young security guard yawned, checked his watch, and stepped inside for the night shift at a school no one remembered. The door clicked shut behind him. And the cycle began again. Cyclone the end.